The Hollywood Actors Strike Explained. Welcome back to Nerdist News. I'm Dan Casey, and today we're taking another break from dissecting pop culture to talk about the most important things happening in the world of entertainment. Specifically, the writers' strike is now officially the Writers and Actors Strike. As you may have heard, on Thursday, SAG-AFTRA, the Screen Actors Guild American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, formally voted to go on strike. The Guild, which represents approximately 160,000 actors and performers, will join the writers on the picket lines where they've been protesting for 70 days and counting. This is one of the biggest strikes in Hollywood history. It marks the first joint strike between the Actors and Writers Guilds in 63 years, and it's the first joint walkout since 1980. After weeks of negotiating, SAG-AFTRA and the AMPTP, or the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, failed to reach an agreement on key issues. The AMPTP, which represents studios like Netflix, Amazon, Apple, Disney, Warner Bros. Discovery, NBC Universal, Paramount, and Sony, is also on the opposing side of the writers' strike as well. This is the first time in 40 years that the Actors Union has called for a strike for this particular contract. During a press conference, SAG-AFTRA President Fran Drescher, and yes, that Fran Drescher, said, "What's happening to us is happening across all fields of labor. When employers make Wall Street and greed their priority and they forget about the essential contributors who make the machine run, we have a problem." Drescher continued by excoriating the greed of studio executives. "I cannot believe it, quite frankly, how far apart we are on so many things. How they plead poverty, that they're losing money left and right when they're giving hundreds of millions of dollars to their CEOs. It's disgusting. Shame on them. They stand on the wrong side of history." The Actors Guild is protesting exploitative business practices created by the streaming economy. The issues being negotiated are very similar to those of the writers. One of the primary issues is dwindling residuals payments. Performers receive these payments whenever a project they're in is syndicated, aired elsewhere, or reused by different entertainment networks. In 2022, writer Kira Jones illustrated how the issue of declining residuals affects screenwriters. On Twitter, she wrote, "In case y'all are wondering why a WGA strike may be impending, my first residual check for the broadcast show I wrote on was $12,000. I just got my first residual check for my streaming show, $4. Because, folks, gone are the days where the cast of Friends makes millions and millions of dollars in syndication money. The New Yorker recently profiled cast members from Orange is the New Black. It was one of the first major hits of the streaming era and something that put Netflix on the map. Actor Matt McGorry revealed, "I kept my day job the entire time I was on the show because it paid better than the mega hit TV show we were on." Orange is the New Black star Kimiko Glenn really drove that discrepancy home in her viral TikTok from 2020, in which she revealed a whopping $27.30 in residuals for what was ostensibly one of Netflix's biggest shows. And more recently, as Matt Damon explained at the Oppenheimer premiere in London, it's not about greed. Rather, it's the difference between having healthcare and not for a lot of working actors. Now, SAG-AFTRA's proposed solution to the issue of declining residual payments is to increase base compensation for performers. They also want to instate performance-based bonuses if something does really well on a streaming platform. But that's a matter that's complicated by streaming networks and their staunch refusal to provide any sort of meaningful insight into their performance metrics. Because unlike television ratings, which are more easily measured by third-party organizations like Nielsen, streaming networks keep their numbers in a proverbial black box. Because, say, for the sake of argument, if the actual viewership numbers on a project are lower than are presented to shareholders, well, that would have catastrophic effects on a streamer's share price, just for the sake of hypothetical argument. Now, much like the writers' strike, one of the major sticking points for SAG-AFTRA and their negotiations is the use of artificial intelligence. Actors want to have control over how their likeness and voice are used by studios. That way they aren't turned into virtual meat puppets against their will. But perhaps the most galling of all is the AMPTP's so-called groundbreaking AI proposal. According to SAG-AFTRA's National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator Duncan Crabtree Ireland, studios basically wanted to pay background extras for one day's work and own their likeness forever. They proposed that our background actors should be able to get scanned, get paid for one day's pay, and their company should own that scan, their image, their likeness, and to be able to use it for the rest of eternity in any project they want with no consent and no compensation. And frankly, that's wild, but the actors joining the writers on their strike changes everything. This strike effectively halts production across much of the industry. Previously, some productions like Deadpool 3 were proceeding with filming despite not being able to do any rewrites or improvisation on set. They had to stick to the script they already had. But with the actors now on strike, sets will now no longer have performers either, which you kinda need to make a movie. Now, even so, some international productions will continue unabated. HBO and Max shows like House of the Dragon and Industry will continue shooting in the UK. And that's because projects like House of the Dragon feature predominantly British casts who are working under equity contracts rather than SAG-AFTRA contracts. Equity, for those who don't know, is the UK Actors Union. And with that said, Equity did issue a statement saying they stand in solidarity with SAG-AFTRA, but they also noted they are subject to, quote, draconian legislation regarding what they can and cannot do. According to Deadline, whether the cast of the show would want to work under the current conditions isn't known, but the UK has strict anti-trade union laws that do not allow for members to strike in unity with other counterparts in other countries. The strike will also bring any major film festivals, awards campaigns, press junkets, and other promotional cycles to a screeching halt, as union members take to the picket lines to protest against exploitative business practices. Case in point, the cast of Oppenheimer, they straight up left the London premiere as soon as the strike was announced. It was happening when they announced it. It also means that San Diego Comic-Con may actually be about comics for a change, because neither writers nor actors can promote their projects in Hall H or beyond. Now, as for how this will affect your viewing habits, well, the effects may not be felt at first because studios still have projects in the pipeline. But as production comes to a halt, that throws the future of their business model into jeopardy. And in the world of business, you're only as good as your last quarter, especially if you're beholden to shareholders. And with projects grinding to a halt, studio execs will surely be feeling increased pressure to return to the negotiating table in good faith before they too may find themselves out of a job. Well, assuming they can come down from their ivory towers, that is. Because hours before f***ing around intersected with finding out, Disney CEO Bob Iger made an appearance on CNBC's Squawk Box. That is, before returning to the Sun Valley Conference in Idaho, which is colloquially referred to as a summer camp for billionaires. Now, Iger, who could be paid as much as $27 million this year, recently signed a new deal to keep running Disney through 2026. He described the level of expectation that striking writers and actors have as just not realistic. And that's particularly rich considering that Iger is one of 8 studio execs who made a collective $773 million in 2022, while other workers struggle to pay their bills. While all this has been happening, industry trades have run several pieces that kind of feel like they're placed by studio reps from the AMPTP. One Deadline article, perhaps intended to demoralize striking writers, contained an absolutely ghoulish sentiment from unnamed studio executives. The article read, "The end game is to allow things to drag on until union members start losing their apartments and losing their houses." Acknowledging the cold as ice approach, several other sources reiterated the statement. One insider called it a cruel but necessary evil. Do you know how cartoonishly diabolical you sound? F*** you. And that sentiment seems to imply the strike might not be over anytime soon. I've heard rumors running the gamut from August to December as far as how long this strike could last. It's part scare tactic to discourage writers and actors who are hurting financially, and part war of attrition. But unfortunately for studios, in this war, it increasingly seems like they're only shooting themselves in the foot. Anyway, folks, there you have it. That's a brief overview of everything you need to know about the actors' strike. Godspeed and solidarity with all of the actors, performers, writers, and other hardworking industry professionals who are busy campaigning for fair treatment and equitable wages. And if you live in places like LA or New York, then please consider joining the picket lines yourself in solidarity. And if you're thinking of crossing the picket lines to take this as your big chance to break into the industry, I don't know, buddy, maybe pump the brakes, because that's what's known as scabbing. And what does scabs ultimately do? Well, they're disgusting lumps of skin that dry up and fall off. Anyway, folks, thank you so much for watching. And as always, for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, make sure you stay tuned to Nerdist.com.